Thank you for tuning into the Pictures of Lily podcast. I'm your host, Lily Moayeri. I've been a music journalist since 1992, and I interview a lot of music-related people. This podcast is about my experience behind the story, my experience doing the interviews, just to give you a snapshot of what it's like on the other side of the digital recorder. Before we get into this episode, that is myself and my husband Lawrence, who is producing, editing, and also directing me in the hosting of this podcast, we want to thank everyone who's listened to our first few episodes. We really appreciate your time and your supportive feedback. It's very motivating for us to continue because, we're just doing this out of the house, and hearing you respond to what we're doing, it's really exciting. Now that we're out of the starting gate, it would be great if you could give us a follow on Spotify and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on Google Play, whichever one of those platforms that you prefer to listen to podcasts on. You can easily find the podcast in Spotify, in Apple, in Google. If you just type in Pictures of Lily, it's right there under podcasts. And please do share the podcast with your family, friends, colleagues. Some of you have asked if it's okay to share. You definitely don't have to ask permission if you can share. Please share. That would be amazing. And some of you have sent me videos of yourselves listening to the podcasts. I really appreciate that. That makes me feel so good. And I'm sharing those with Lawrence, and he's getting remotivated by watching those. So thank you again for that. Pictures of Lily. Back to this episode, I'm going to be talking about my recent experience interviewing Nicolas Godin, who is one half of the French duo Air, who has just released his third solo album, Concrete and Glass. I've been interviewing Nicolas and his partner, JB, since the beginning of their career, which is in the late 90s. They're always very polite, very gracious, but I also feel that every time I interview a French artist, they're also very funny. I don't know that they're trying to be funny. They're just more straightforward. They say what they're thinking. There's no filter, which sometimes when it's translated into English, it makes them sound like they're super sharp comics, just doing observational type humor. Nicolas is getting funnier and more sure of himself every time I interview him. This most recent time, it was for Flood magazine. And even though Concrete and Glass is his third album, Nicolas has done really well out of Air, and he doesn't necessarily need to have a solo career or continue making music in order to pay the bills or anything like that. His albums have been mostly about keeping a record, no pun intended, of the work he has done at certain points in his life. For Concrete and Glass, his friend, who's an artist, Xavier Vellerin, asked Nicolas to create music for exhibitions that he was putting together. These exhibitions, from what I've looked at online as far as images, was Xavier doing sculpture exhibits in different buildings created by modernist architects in different parts of the world. There's one in Russia, or maybe more than one in Russia. There's some in LA, there's some in France, there's some in Spain. They are all over the world, and he asked Nicolas to create music to go with these exhibitions. Once Nicolas and Xavier were done with the exhibition, Nicolas wanted to do something with all the music he had because he spent a lot of time creating it. Each one of them was created in the space so that they're all very different from each other and very representative of where they're being listened to. Once Nicolas and Xavier were done with the exhibitions, Nicolas wanted to do something with all the music he made. So he shaped them into songs, got some vocalists on them, named it after one of the materials that made up his favorite building they exhibited in, and he had an album. I did ask him about new music from Air because I know that everybody wants to know what's new from Air, what's coming up, if they're going to be doing anything. And this is what he told me, and this is the quote directly from the article. Being a musician and getting older, it's not easy. I don't have any examples of artists I love growing old making great records. When I make records, I'm always worried if what I'm doing is good. Is it relevant? Does it have a raison d'être? Air, we have a good back catalog and we're going to do great shows until we're 80 years old, but I'm not sure we can make great albums until we're 80. After a certain point, you have a legacy career. Before that point, you have a creative career. What I tried to do with Concrete and Glass was be creative, and I hope I nailed it. With Air, if I feel we can make an album that would be as good as the old ones, I would do it. The magic I knew with Air is now when I go on stage, not when I go in the studio. We're in the live business rather than the record business.
I can celebrate.
So this is a super honest and true snapshot. It's not even behind the scenes. This is a very honest thing that Nicolas is saying. And I know that all musicians that are in the same phase of their career as him know this deep down, but none of them has ever said it to me. I don't think they say it to themselves. I don't think they say it to each other. And they're just kind of in slightly of a denial thing about this. I actually said that to Nicolas, and I'm like, I know this, you know this, but nobody would ever admit it. And he was saying that it's his philosophical French attitude that allows him to be honest. This is what he told me. I wouldn't say that if I were a fashion designer or a film director or a famous decorator. And if I lived in Los Angeles, I would have this positive attitude and be productive and have lots of meetings. People forget, we're going to die. In 20 years, I'm going to be an old person. I don't want to lose my life to run it.
All I need is a little sign to get behind the sun and cast his way.
Those are a few snapshots of my recent experience interviewing Nicolas Godin of Air, who's a lot funnier than you would think he would be. One of the quotes in Flood says, "The paradox of the album title is that Concrete and Glass are acoustically the worst elements for music." This is what I mean about funny. Check out Concrete and Glass, and also check out his debut album Contrepoint, as well as the soundtrack he did for the French television show Au Service de la France. You can read the entirety of my feature on Nicolas at floodmagazine.com. That's FLOODMAGAZINE.com, floodmagazine.com. Or you can link to it through my blog, picturesoflily.com. It should be right there at the top. Thank you for all the positive words and the encouragement for our first few episodes. Please do follow us on Spotify or subscribe on Apple or on Google Play. And also, please do rate and review if you're listening via Apple Podcasts. These connections that we make are essential to keep us going. In the next episode of the Pictures of Lily podcast, I'm going to be talking to you about a recent interview I did with one of the best live electronic acts out there, Underworld. I've been interviewing those guys for so many years, so many interviews, but this most recent one, I got to learn a whole bunch of stuff about them that I didn't know even after all this time, so stay tuned for that. Once again, thank you for listening.
Pictures of Lily.